Welcome to the Network Chatter, a show dedicated to the sci-fi horror RPG Vast Grimm. In today's episode, episode 3, we talk to the main contributing artists of the Vast Grimm core book.
Hello, everybody. We're going to go around and introduce everybody. Alan, and we've got, so it's Alan Panicle, is that right?
Yep, that's correct, Alan Panicle.
And we got Brian Collin and David LaRocca. I'm going to let you all introduce yourself. Alan, it's great to hear you. And, I've seen your artwork and everything, but this is actually the first time I've heard your voice. So it's great to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too.
Let's just go around and everybody introduce yourself. We'll start with you, Alan.
Oh, great. Well, my name's Alan Panicle. I run my own series called The Ancient Ones. I just published my first book. Feel free to go buy it if you want it. It's basically a sci-fi adventure.
Excellent.
What's up? Oh, you read it?
I have a copy and it's excellent.
Oh, thank you. I'm waiting. I'm waiting for some. I've asked some people, and I'll probably bother Brian and David later to give me reviews on it because people don't have time to read it yet. But it's okay. What else can I say about myself? It is. If you guys have seen my art, I think Brian came up with a term called fracturism for it. It's very broken and impressionistic. And again, I deal with mainly science fiction, fantasy. I've wanted to work with Brian and David on a project forever. So when they asked me if I wanted to work on stuff for Vast Grimm, I was immediately in, without even any deals or stipulations. So here I am in all my glory.
Well, it also helps that we're the three of us are really good friends. So
yeah, right. I mean, it was awesome that it was like, I talked to Brian about it, and I said, I didn't need to talk about what I get out of it. I was like, I just want to work on something with you guys because I feel like there's potential I want to work with you guys on future projects, and I feel like this one's awesome. I mean, I took one look at it and I was like, it sings to my branding and my aesthetic,
Yeah, I think this was the perfect project, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it wasn't like it like all of us love this like the time period, the style. We all love RPGs. It's colors, man. The colors spoke to me so much, so I was like, I'm in.
All right, let's go. Brian, you can introduce yourself.
Sure. Hey, I'm Brian Collin. I am the creator of Vast Grimm. I am a member of Infinite Black. I do a little bit of everything from design to project management to dealing with manufacturing, and I'm also a sculptor, a writer, and did a good chunk of the layout and for Vast Grimm itself. And I met David. I actually got to know David and Alan all at the very same time, pretty much on the way to and at one convention many years ago, and which is part of why I think all of the art melds so well together in this book. But that's enough about me for the introduction. I'll pass it off to David.
Yep. I'm David LaRocca. I own Infinite Black. Started it few years ago now. I am an artist. I do product design and have my hand in a little bit of everything. And so I'm also, like I said, I'm an artist. So my primary mediums are graphite, and I also do digital art as well, digital painting. Actually, for Vast Grimm, I kind of went in a little bit different direction and went pen and ink, and I'm sure we're about to get into that sort of thing. But yeah, I like to do a lot of different things, and looking forward to this chat.
Cool. And I'm Lat Vine. I'm a member of Team Infinite Black, and I do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, some digital content creation, and I'm moderating this, but I'm definitely also no stranger to doing some digital art. My background is doing random indie mobile type games, not just mobile, done random stuff. This chat is going to be all about the art in the Vast Grimm game and kind of about you guys and just, how you do your art, how you approach it, and all of that kind of stuff. To kind of start off with, I figured a good way to start might be to just kind of get a background of how each of you sort of started making visual art and sort of the journey that you've gone through with your art, because everybody starts making art at some point, but kind of your style and the way you approach it sort of evolves as you work through the years. So, Brian, why don't you start and just kind of like give us a summary of when you started making visual art and what kind of changes has it gone through over the years?
Man, this could take up the whole episode and then a couple
Okay,
more.
well,
but
you're gonna have
do-
to condense it. You're gonna have to condense it a little bit.
Excellent. I've always wanted to make art. In elementary school, I decided I wanted to be a comic book illustrator. I went to college thinking that that was what I would do. I realized in my second year of college that I was not strong enough at illustration, so I went into graphic design. But I still always wanted to make art. So later in life, in '99, I self-published my first comic book. Did comic books off and on up through 2004. And then I realized I needed to do something different because it was too expensive to make comics. And I started painting, and then I started customizing toys. And customizing toys turned into sculpting, and sculpting turned into big monsters. And then those monsters took me to conventions to where all the RPGs are and our people are. And that's where I met David, and then that's where I met Alan. And then my sculpting continued on, and I still do sculpting and some painting, and I do big three-dimensional pieces, but I also sculpt on boards and paint with miniature paints, and do some digital illustration, but that's more like photo. I consider most of the stuff that I do like that more like graphic design and graphic manipulation than like art painting and things. So,
David, a lot of Infinite Black fans will probably know your work from the Older Dice campaigns. So talk about your journey as an artist and maybe some of the challenges figuring out how to take everything you do and put it into the Vast Grimm universe.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll do a speed run just like Brian just did. I've been an artist ever since I can remember being a kid. I can remember drawing trains and things when I was in kindergarten, and then that evolved into drawing my favorite video games and things like that going up through elementary school and then into high school. I actually started creating digital artwork in the 90s with MS Paint, where I only had like 16 colors to use, and it was fun but challenging. And then I discovered Photoshop later on, but for some reason I always knew that I wanted to get into digital art. I think that was mainly because of video games. I had a dream back in the day to do professional video game artwork and development. And I ended up going to school for 3D modeling and animation. And I finished that and worked professionally as a 3D modeler, animator, also graphic design work and different types of digital artwork and things like that along the lines. And then eventually moved out on my own as a freelance artist working in both digital and traditional mediums, graphite, like you said, Lat. That kind of is where I transitioned from doing artwork for other people and doing artwork for myself. And so a lot of those pieces that I created ended up, I was able to use those with Elder Dice, and also I'm using those on Journey to the Tree of Sorrows, which we're working on. But those pieces are primarily graphite, and so specifically for Vast Grimm, I wanted to try to do something a little bit different than what I was used to doing. So instead of going with graphite, which one of the nice things about graphite is obviously you're moving it around, you can erase it, you can layer it and things. And so I wanted to go outside my comfort zone with Vast Grimm, and I went pen and ink. And once you put it down, it's not coming back up. And it was a lot of fun. It was some awesome exploration and a chance to really to do something different. I also did some digital work too, and I'm sure we'll get into that type of stuff a little bit later on, but that's a little bit about me.
Alan, tell us about your journey.
Well, let's see. I come from a family of artists. Basically, in my dad's side of the family, there's always every other generation is an artist, so I landed squarely in that area.
You're like a
Um,
slayer.
I'm like a what?
You're like a slayer to each generation of Panicle.
That's
An
right.
artist is born.
Yeah, and and then the parents are very disappointed because I'm not a doctor or a pharmacist. Um, but I had uncles. I had an uncle who in India, he was a priest, but he was also a musician and a painter, and he's very well known there as a composer. He taught me how to paint when I was younger. So I started out traditionally, but as I got to school in Chicago, I remember David's story about MS Paint reminded me of one of my first forays into any kind of digital, I guess, quote unquote, digital art was I created an image of the neutrinos from TMNT using a Mac and only numbers. Like you had to like use the grid system, right? And I probably have that drawing somewhere. But I never even got into Photoshop till I was in my first year of college because I didn't realize such a thing existed. And I started, I think, on Photoshop 3.1. So I've been at Photoshop for a while. But my aesthetic started developing after I graduated college. I studied as a web and graphic designer. So a lot of my style is just very, easygoing graphic design work, and I did that for a number of years for a corporate job. But while I was there, I started thinking about just can I swear on here? Fracking around. And
I guess so. I don't know.
whatever. I created
Might as well.
I started the early development of my style while I was working this job, doing a lot of fan art pieces and combining my Photoshop's graphic skills mixed with a little bit of I did a lot of graffiti art as a kid, so I just kind of combined them together, and it kind of started evolving into something. And then I started mentoring under specific artists who helped me further develop that. So what you see in the Ancient Ones stuff right now is, I mean, it's probably still going to evolve at some point again, but what you see now is the stuff that, I always I leaned heavy into, I grew up in the 80s, so I loved outrun style and synthwave music and all that jazz. So I leaned heavy into that vibe. So a lot of my work has if that nostalgic feeling to it. That's what I love about it, and that's what I really liked about Vast Grimm. I said it before we went live, but it's one of the things I loved about this project was it has the 90s vibe to it, but it still has that 80s aesthetic too, right? It's like it all kind of merges together. And it's got that cool I was a skater. I love No Fear graphics all day, and it has that feeling to me. It gives me a really cool I think I told Brian this. It made me feel like a kid again, when I was looking at the work and trying to look at the project. Because I
Yeah,
grew up,
I get that. That's a good way to put it.
yeah, I played RPGs in high school. That's where I first started playing. D&D wasn't. I didn't play D&D till I was out of high school. In high school, I was playing stuff like Rifts and stuff like that. But this game had that feeling of cool. I'm young again. I'm playing this cool game that really speaks to me in certain degrees. So. Yeah, I mean that's my style. It's a little wild. People always think I'm on drugs, but I'm not. I'm on a lot of whiskey though, so that might be it.
Yeah.
My favorite is, how do you sleep at night?
Yeah,
Is one of the common questions at conventions.
Yes, it's wonderful.
it's really hard to sleep at night because you're constantly trying to come up with ideas.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's right.
I was saying is I've gotten in the habit of keeping a notebook next to my bed so I can write stuff down as I keep popping up.
Hey, Lat, I was going to say before we move on, why don't you tell us about your journey?
Yeah, sure.
You
So
on the spot.
I've always loved drawing. When I was really little, I did want to be a cartoonist. I really wanted to make panel cartoons from the newspaper.
Nice.
But at some point or other, I guess, I know I've always drawn, but at some point or other, I kind of moved past that, and eventually, when I went to college and did computer science and kind of got burned out pretty quick after college on that. And so I started making games and everything. And I really didn't get into really putting effort into making digital art until I started making games and I needed to make art for my games. And then over the years, it's just I don't know if I enjoy it more. No, I probably do enjoy it more. Yeah, I really enjoyed making art, and I've really tried to push myself to do different kinds of digital art. And now sometimes I make art that just I don't even know what I'm going to use it for. There's no way to even really crop it out to use in one of my games. But
You're basically creating art for art's sake, right?
yeah, yeah. And
Something wrong with
I've
that.
always done digital art. I've never actually really done like real painting or whatever, other than just like doodling and stuff with like a pencil. I've done, stuff like that. But I think the next big part of my journey is I really would like to do like actual, painting on canvas. I've never done it. So,
That's what I'm trying to like. I've had several art directors ask me if I want to do my stuff traditionally, and I'm like, I don't know how to. I mean, I know how to paint the shapes in, but I don't know how to get the same vibrancy.
when I started doing more digital art, like eventually I bought a tablet PC because I really wanted like a better device to do, digital painting on. And when I first started into that, it was like a completely different kind of way to make art from just like doing pixel art or line art because I had to think about like volume. So I think a lot of what I learned doing digital art probably would translate to doing on canvas, but I would just have to relearn the whole procedure of it, the method of it with a brush, and you know, eventually I'm going to get around to doing that. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm starting out small right now and just painting different parts of the pieces that I've already done just to see if I can do it. We'll see. I'm not stressing it. It's more of a let's have a good time trying.
most of my art is really organic and messy, kind of like features, landscapes, and stuff. But one thing I'm really, really just terrible at, like I just don't have the brain for it, is anything that's like mechanical or has a lot of like really straight lines. Like people who draw cars and stuff or paint cars really impress me because it's like I just don't know how they even do that. My question is, what styles are most natural for each of you as an artist, and what is that thing that you can't do that's just for some reason your mind just can't wrap your head around it?
I'm like you, Lat. I do not like sharp geometric shapes. I don't like almost everything I make is very organic in nature. It's very like I don't want it to have to be exactly symmetrical and have it to be like precise. Like if I were to have to like make a blaster or something like that from scratch, there's no way I could do it without cutting bits and pieces of other things and just gluing them together and having very little actual sculpting involved, and it's all just kit bashed pieces.
I would say that what I'm good at and most like comfortable with is organic things like what you guys said. But what I tend to do is I'll create a bunch of if I know what it is that I'm trying to create, like the end goal is like a painting of Yog Sothoth or something like that. I go through tons and tons and tons of thumbnails, which are basically super tiny little sketches that you literally spend, or I literally spend anywhere from 5 seconds on to maybe at the most a couple minutes. But even if it's a couple minutes, that's usually too long. And the idea with that is to, just put ideas down, shapes and things down to get composition and things, and just to explore some ideas quickly without a lot of time investment there. And then I kind of go through those thumbnails and pick out which ones are speaking to me, and then do a series of sketches to refine those. And of those sketches, I try to figure out, which one of these is working the most, which one is capturing the idea that I'm trying to put across, which one is interesting, and those sorts of things. And then that turns into a final drawing. And then from that final drawing, I'll actually start the final piece. That's one way I work. But there's another way that I work, which is completely opposite of that, which is I go into a piece with absolutely no idea what I'm making. And that's actually what I did for Vast Grimm. I really started each piece with absolutely no expectations and just kind of I just wanted to see where it went. So I started making lines and shapes and blobs and things on the paper with ink. And sometimes they would come out and they'd be kind of crappy, and sometimes they come out and I'd be like, "Yep, that's what I picture for my contribution to Vast Grimm."
The stuff that you didn't know exactly where it was going to go and where it would be laid out in the book itself,
Yeah.
turned out some really fantastic art that I never would have seen it going to those places, and I'm so thrilled that it did.
Yeah, I kind of did like an art dump on Brian, and I'm like, "Look, man, here's a ton of stuff. If you can use it, great. If you can't use it, that's fine too. You're not going to hurt my feelings, you know." So if you can find a home for it, go for it. If you can't, we'll file it away for something else or whatever. It's kind of like with Lat. Some of it's just making art for art's sake, and you can't really find a home for it other than the fact that it's a piece of art that you created.
With your ink drawings that you did for Vast Grimm, did you do ink with a pen, or is it brush ink?
It's actually both. So sometimes I would start a piece with just pen ink, and literally just moving the pen around on the paper with no idea, no direction, and just start seeing shapes as it moves and picking things out that I like, and then starting to accentuate those things and detail those things. Where I struggle is anatomy from memory. I don't try to do figure drawing and things from memory anymore. I used to think that was what made an artist great, was being able to sit down without reference and being able to create something.
We've learned a lot since then.
Yeah. And now I realize that not only is that what you're supposed to do, but it's also what the old masters did. It's not like they're magicians or something like that. So, I mean, some people can do it, and that's awesome, and freaking more power to them. But that's just something that I can't do. No.
Yeah, human anatomy and human figure is really hard. I'm not good at that either, and it's especially hard just because people are so used to seeing people. If you get it wrong, it's very obvious.
Yes. So I tend to make more landscapes than anything because I love fantasy worlds, and I'm really actually not bad at creating a landscape. My compositions, sometimes people are like, compositions are really nice. And it's like, I think it's because I look at a lot of art, and sometimes I'll see a composition I really like, and also I have the graphic design background, so there's some of that layout coming into play. But my weak spot is, like David was saying, anatomy. Like, I cannot draw from the top of my head. I use a lot of reference when I draw people, and even that doesn't turn out the way I want it to, because I'm not good at drawing people. It's just what I admit it, and I want to do all these characters for my series right now, and I have tons of art sitting here for them. None of it looks good to me. I feel like if I shared it, people would say it's fine, but I get in my own head about those things. And then another one of my weak spots is thumbnails. I remember I saw David's thumbnails at a LuxCon one year, and I do thumbnails now because I realize the value in doing them, but for the most part, I kind of follow the second method David was speaking about, which is I tend to like start creating colors and shapes really fast, and then I see something in those shapes, and then I'm like, okay, here's a tree, or here's a mountain, or oh, here's a spaceship, and then I start like kind of pulling things apart and bringing them back together. Once I have that basic idea down, then I do a lot of references, and sometimes I'll even photo bash if I have to, because like I have a piece called The Traveler. I don't own a spacesuit. I don't know anyone who's in NASA, so I needed reference shots. So I definitely had to look up reference for that, and I photo bashed some of it because, again, I'm not very good at anatomy.
What is photo bashing?
It's kind of taking a digital, like an image of something you need, like in this case, a spacesuit, and then I painted over it digitally.
Okay. All right.
But I still had to create the pose. So the Traveler, for example, the pose I used Daz Studio to create the pose, and then that kind of gave me a reference on how he's gonna quote unquote float. Like he's got like a bent knee and then a leg going to the background, which again, I was trying to learn how to do that. In Daz Studio, you can kind of set it up and then set up your lighting. So it kind of gave me an idea of where the shadows and lights are, if that makes sense. If you look at my Knight of Jupiter. He's probably one of the first pieces I ever did. He's got 4 arms, so I had to look up like a lot of like mythology, like gods and stuff. But like I also had the help of a lot of artists who were like, that's not where the arms would go. They would kind of be up here, and I learned things like crossing over the body. Like you should have stuff cross over the body so it looks natural. I think Brian and David know this. The original design of this character had no head. And a lot of people couldn't relate to it because people couldn't relate to heads and hands. Something I had to learn the hard way. Faces and hands. If your artwork doesn't have faces and hands, it's hard for people to apparently feel something for it.
I need to stop making worms.
Yeah, I mean your worm's got a face. That's
they do have faces.
That's
yeah,
right.
so like the landscape pieces, I like it's kind of I had an artist once tell me my landscape pieces are harder to pitch to people because there's nothing human about a landscape piece, right? Like, I mean, let me say that right over again. There's nothing human about a science fiction landscape piece. You got to find something for yourself to like relate to in that piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the astronaut, the traveler, he's this dude floating in space. So you're like, you could be that person floating in space, maybe. But and then you go to the mermaid is a mermaid. People can relate to a mermaid because they've heard about mermaids forever. But then you have this landscape piece, and you're like, what am I looking at? But I think when people read the stories behind my pieces, then they're kind of like, oh, because I gave you the story. Now you kind of understand what you're looking at. Now you can relate to it. Now we're both on the same page, if that makes sense. But so like,
I'm looking at some of your stuff on Instagram. I see like some of your landscapes, you'll put the figure in the front to sort of, I guess, give that the viewer the human element to get them in.
Exactly. And that's from my mentors are like, you got to put like just either a bird in the shot or a little dude in the shot or something where they could say, So I started doing that with my newer pieces because they were right, obviously. But I fought it for a while because I was just like, I don't really want to put a person in the shot. Why? Because I was also looking at a lot of older paintings. I go to the Art Institute a lot over here in Chicago, and you don't see people in those paintings. They're just nice landscapes,
Brian, I have another question I wanted to ask you, and you would think I'd know this since I work for Infinite Black, but I really don't know what's in your head.
Very few do.
Okay,
Brian doesn't know what's in his head.
No.
If you look on like the game found page for Vast Grimm, one of the elements that you work in on graphics everywhere, they're on the products and in the book, is the microchip or the circuit board, and you've got the chip, and it's usually got like the symbol on it, but often it's the Grimm symbol, which our symbol, it looks like a skull. What is it? Like, is that just something you like the look of, or does that actually tie in with the Vast Grimm world?
So that came about when I was doing one of the very first things that I think like helped sell the whole concept of Vast Grimm was when I was working on what is now the cover of the book. And before there was that circuit behind it, that circuit board area behind it, it had like some spatter color and stuff like that, and it just didn't have that kind of cyber futury kind of feel to it. So that circuit board is a modified stock photo from a place that I purchase stock photos from regularly and adjust just the circuit part itself. And when that came in behind the worm on the cover of the book, it was obvious that it needed to tie into more elements in the campaign. And at which point David took it and really made it beautiful with like, especially the center circuit with putting the symbols on there and really making that look a lot better than it did in the stock photo that we bought, and just really made it shine. So the main thing about it is giving you the overall feel that this is scientific. This is, you're on spaceships, and the circuitry and things like that is kind of the network and how everything all kind of connects together on a technological side. It's not overly used within the interior of the book, but it's something that's definitely part of the aesthetic, especially of the grimoires and the book itself and the graphics in the campaign. And I'm sure it'll be used on the graphics of the website once we launch that after the campaign's over.
Yeah. I guess I've seen it so much. I figured it must have some like significance in the game world. Like there was an actual computer somewhere, like maybe in like the worms came out of the mausoleum, right? So I was wondering
Right.
if maybe this is some sort of thing that was there.
Not yet, but you know, a lot of that lore hasn't been written. We wrote it very open-ended to allow people to make it their own. So it could be.
All right.
Cool.
So another kind of random question. So a friend of mine who had never really played any RPG games until much later in life after he had a kid, he told me that he started making art and got into art. He was a pretty good artist and he had done art his whole life. But he said that he started making art because when he was really, I guess in like middle school or something, these kids at his school who were really into RPG games always would request that he draw their characters. And so
Awesome.
he knew about like Dungeons and Dragons, but he had never played. And but he was always really interested in it because of those kids. And I don't know why they never invited him to play, but that's another story, I guess. But so my question is like, did that experience happen to you? And like question, but how have like RPG games sort of influenced your art?
When I was in high school, nobody played where I'm from. I live out in the country. People that play RPGs were weirdos and stuff like that. And it's the devil's game and all this other stuff. I couldn't find anybody to play with. And I used to buy the vampire books, Vampire the Masquerade, just because I loved the artwork so much, even though I knew that nobody was ever going to play it with me. And I actually didn't start playing D&D until probably like 98. Well, no, it's 99. So started playing Dungeons and Dragons and just fell in love with it. And then eventually I got to a point where I was like, man, I love this game so much. I would love to make some artwork for this game. I ended up, my mentor was a guy named John Shindahedi, and I spent several years with him, and he really helped me out in a lot of ways, just guiding me, not just in artwork, but just in life itself too. I mean, it's just all these, it almost became like this fatherly figure for me for a while. And he was the art director for Dungeons and Dragons. It was before I started mentoring under him. But so I told him, you know, about my love for Dungeons and Dragons and how I wanted to make artwork for it. So he's like, okay, well, let's work on some pieces that would be relevant. And so when you show them your portfolio, they'll be able to instantly see, you know, characters from that, you know, like Dritz and those sorts of characters, and they'll automatically be able to see what you can do with their characters. And so I started doing that, and I started doing some stuff for Pathfinder too. And when I started working on other people's characters and scenes and everything, I was like, you know what? I don't really like making other people's stuff. Like I want to make my stuff, you know? It's like
Yes.
as much as I want to make artwork for Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder and all this other stuff, you know, it's like if I can make my own thing, that's what I want to do. That's what I'm in love with. I love making art, but this kind of feels like work. And that's not why I started doing this, you know? And it's not a knock on freelance artists at all. It's just that or companies, you know, I mean, because we have freelance artists, we need them. But it just wasn't what I was into. And I didn't realize it until I got into it, you know, because looking at it, it's like, oh my God, this game is what I've been playing and I love it. And I want to make artwork for it so much. And when the time came to really put my head down and do it, I was like, this is not for me. And I figured that out once I actually did it. And that's, you know,
and that's how you learn.
yeah.
It's funny that you and I have never had this conversation, but I've never had an interest in doing other people's stuff, and I never really have. I've always just like, I want to make art and I want to make it, and then the RPG stuff falls around the art that I make.
I feel like, yeah, you guys are polar opposites in that area.
Well, no, like I mean, I grew up playing all sorts of games. I think the only time I really made any stuff that I like drawing as a kid for RPG stuff was like when we played the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Beyond RPG or whatever it was called at the time.
Yeah.
But like David said, like he tried doing some work for some of the big companies and didn't enjoy it. But the RPGs always influenced me in what I made, but I never made stuff to try and I never had an interest in making stuff for other people's RPGs.
So do you think if somebody approached you, like, I don't know, like Wizards of the Coast for one of their products, and they wanted to commission you to make a sculpture or something for one of their games, would you do it?
I'd probably have
Yes.
to look at my schedule because I mean I like making my own stuff. I'm you probably realize this after like throwing ideas at me about Vast Grimm. I kind of like being in control of stuff.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I feel
to
like
be honest
WotC
with
is
you, I think I looked at those companies, and this was totally subconscious. Like I wasn't actually being honest with myself, but I really looked at, getting a job working for Wizards or getting a job doing work for Vampire through White Wolf and those other companies. Really what it boiled down to is I wanted validation.
Totally.
I knew that
Sure.
if these companies hired me, that I was a good artist. And
Yeah.
I eventually realized that that's bullshit.
Yes. I mean,
Yep.
it takes time to learn. Like, I think every artist I would say 9 out of 10 wants to work for WotC, right? They want to work for Magic the Gathering. They want to work for D&D. They want that recognition, like you just said. But then after a while, you learn, I kind of want to do my own thing, and I'm happier doing my own thing. Like David and Brian know that I've done 3 board games now. I kept wanting to do board games, so I did the board games, and I didn't hate it, but I didn't enjoy it. Right? There was a level of stress and a level of I really should be working on Ancient One stuff, but I'm here spending time on this project that's not even my own. And that's not to say I hated working on Vast Grimm. I enjoyed it. And I also feel like if you work with people that you enjoy working with, it also makes a huge difference when you're doing freelance, right? I've never worked for WotC, so anyone listening from WotC, please give me a job. I'd take it. I mean, I'd love to do like one card for WotC, I feel like, but I feel like it's because high school version of Alan wants to do a magic card just to say he's done a magic card.
Yeah, I get
And
that.
then, and then he just duck out, right? I'd be like, check out this cool land card I did. Peace out, homies. I'm going back to Ancient Ones now,
Yeah.
Well, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but in high school, I actually did make some magic cards and put them in my deck. They were completely unofficial, of course.
Of course. You were that guy. You were that guy who threw out a card and we'd be like, is that a legit card? I mean, it's cool if you got away with it.
Dude,
I didn't get away with it.
Oh.
I was really obnoxious about it. I liked it so that when that card came out, it was sort of like the game ended just because of how stupid it was. Like,
was it a win card?
It was basically one card. In fact, one of them I just like used Paint Shop Pro way back in the day, and it actually had a picture of me on it. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Perfect.
Yeah,
I realized
those were not tournament legal cards.
I realized I should send you guys a photo of this. Back in the day, Magic had a contest to create. Remember when they had the avatars? If you remember Magic, so they had a contest to create your own avatar, and I created an avatar that I sent in, and I won like a certificate award. I didn't win like anything fancy from it, but I found a business card from it the other day, and the more I stared at it, the more I realized it's what eventually became the design for my Knight of Jupiter. Like it was always just in the back of my head, I guess. So I was like, oh, interesting. I don't know if that's like my brain kicking it back into gear or like the universe saying, hey, man, you're not done with this piece of artwork. And whatever,
I mean, one of the things about what we do now, like, at least for me, it's like I'm doing what I dreamed about doing in middle school. Like, my middle school teacher wrote in my yearbook about me wishing me luck writing D&D adventures. And, here I am writing RPG adventures. It's like you're supposed to do the stuff that you enjoyed as a kid to enjoy your life as much as you can.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like RPGs Lad had asked like if they influenced our work, and I absolutely feel like they did. I didn't play RPGs until I was in high school, and I feel like it was a huge part of me creating the universe I've created right now because it taught me to like think outside of like you don't need a standard layout for what story you're writing. You can have fun and just go anywhere you want, especially in a sci-fi world, right? There's no rules, right? And I think Brian, you and I think we're joking about this the other day. Like, I think it was Sean and I mentor under Sean Murray, who, if anyone knows him, he has a project called City of Gateway. He's an amazing world builder. So he teaches me a lot about world building. But him and I were joking because I was creating some space lycanthropes or space werewolves in the series. And I had gotten into it with somebody back in the day who said, you can't have werewolves in space. And I said, why not? It's science fiction. I could have
That's against the rules, Alan.
It's
but
apparently against
but
the
what if you
rules.
fly the spaceship past some moons or something?
They just keep morphing over and over. Like.
Well, anybody got anything else?
I think it's been a great chat. I appreciate everybody coming out and listening to us, and thanks to Alan for.
No, man, thanks for having me. It's great.
Thanks for talking with us.
I haven't had a chance. I haven't spoken to David in forever.
Yep.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's
kind of been isolated.
I get it, man. It's all good.
Yeah.
Gen Con will be
We'll
here.
all be at Gen Con, though, all four of us.
Yep.
Yes.
I need to play Vast Grimm when we're there.
Yeah, we should. That'd be fun.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah, we definitely should. I didn't even think about that.
It's on. I will run games with like very little sleep, and
yeah, we're gonna be exhausted. I maybe I regret saying that.
No, I think there's got to be at least a couple of games of Vast Grimm at Gen Con, even if
you're
it
not gonna
means it's
sleep at
after work
Gen Con.
What's
you
that?
You don't sleep at Gen Con. You work.
I know you hustle. That's what we do.
Last Gen Con, Brian and I would go to dinners or whatever, and Brian would be punching holes in his pins the whole time. Actually, we took turns. Remember, we had one hole punch and a bunch of pins. So if you hung out with us, we'd be at the bar having a drink while punching holes in our pin.
Because we were part of this pin program where a marketing program, and so they didn't put holes in the pin bags, so we couldn't hang them on our racks. So we had to get hole punches and just like punch through like 2 or 3 at a time, and man, that took a while.
It's actually really nice to hang out and talk about this stuff on
it was fun. Thanks, everybody.
Tune in next time. Real quick, the next chat will be coming up next week. I can't remember exactly what day, but we will be making announcements. I believe it is talking about the writing with Ross and myself.
Cool. All right. Well, good night and thank you.
Good night, all.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.